Complete communities are welcoming places in which people can live and learn, work and play. They're shaped by planning systems, by urban design, and by the architecture of buildings. This presentation defines and describes common community planning systems. First, this presentation defines complete communities. Next, it describes community planning and how zoning and development review processes govern our communities, at least here in California, and why this matters. We consider how community planning creates positive outcomes for people and plays a significant role in positive community change over time. When we say complete communities, we mean communities that include a healthy mix of the housing types and jobs that reflect the needs of the whole community, promote equity, and include many choices for mobility or moving around. In complete communities, buildings and streets are thought of and designed together with the goal of creating healthy, thriving places for people. In designing complete communities, we need to pay attention to both the buildings and the spaces between them, including streets and sidewalks, parks, and public spaces. Streets are designed for maximum access, enjoyment, and safety for all people, whether walking, riding bikes, using buses or trains, or driving. Transit station areas typically include the 1.5 mile around stations. These areas can be designed compactly, mixing uses in order to save energy and water, and can house riders and provide them and others in the community with a mix of services and amenities that they need for daily living and special occasions. New development, wherever it's located, should improve the physical, economic, and social environment. It should serve and include the full range of people that already live nearby and welcome others. The two primary processes that regulate the use of land in our communities are planning and zoning. In planning, cities and counties describe their visions for the future, set goals for future actions, and establish policies and implementation programs to make desired changes happen. Zoning complements planning and includes a set of more detailed land use tools that regulate development on specific parcels of land. Cities and counties in California are required by the state to adopt general plans. These long-term plans serve as the local government's blueprint, guiding the community's vision of future growth. By law, the general plan is required to be updated periodically. While there's no requirement for precisely how often the general plan should be updated, the planning period has traditionally been 15 to 20 years. Each of the 9 or more elements of general plans can be updated individually. California law mandates that local jurisdictions' general plan elements address land use, circulation or mobility, housing, open space, conservation, safety, noise, environmental justice, and air quality. Some jurisdictions also choose to address subjects like community health, equity, and economic development in their general plans. Next, we describe a few of the backbone elements of the general plan in more detail. The land use element of the general plan must depict the general distribution, location, and allowable intensity of use for all land uses including housing, commercial and industrial land, open space and conservation lands, parks and public facilities, and agriculture lands. The designation and mapping of these land uses is based on the shared vision of the community's future. The open space element of the general plan identifies land that is generally undeveloped and may provide value for recreation, health, habitat, biodiversity, wildlife conservation aesthetics, economy, climate change mitigation and adaptation, flood risk reduction, managed natural resources production, agricultural production, and protection from hazardous conditions. The housing element of the general plan implements the state law that the availability of housing is a matter of vital statewide importance, and the attainment of decent housing and a suitable living environment for all Californians is a priority of the highest order. The law requires that the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, review and certify the housing element and that local jurisdictions submit annual progress reports. The housing element must be revised and submitted periodically on a 4, 5, or 8-year cycle. As part of the housing element, jurisdictions must address the production of housing that is affordable for households that are at and above median income, as well as those that are low, very low, and extremely low income. The mobility element supports connectivity in complete communities by describing access to a range of mobility systems and choices, including buses and trains, cars, walking, biking, and rolling on other wheeled devices. Newer mobility choices are challenging the traditional idea of streets as mostly places for cars and buses. This is causing new challenges for planners to accommodate increasingly popular modes of travel, including skateboards and scooters, which may not easily fit either on sidewalks or in streets. In addition to mandating that a range of topics are included in the general plan, state law also requires the local planning agency to provide opportunities to involve the community. The law also requires that a jurisdiction make a diligent effort to include all economic groups when drafting, adopting, and implementing its housing element. While state law requires stakeholders to be informed about the process, many communities choose a deeper engagement by involving, collaborating with, or even empowering stakeholders to participate. Fine-grained planning for specific areas or communities within a city or county's general plan can be addressed by community plans. For example, the city of Los Angeles, at roughly 500 square miles in size, has 35 community plan areas, each of which is a part of and must be consistent with the city's general plan. Specific plans also govern smaller, unique areas within a city and must also be consistent with the city's general plan. Specific plans are different from other plans because they include both planning and zoning tools, which are usually found in separate documents. In addition to setting out a vision and goals for an area, a specific plan must address land use, circulation, and infrastructure needs. Specific plans come in many different shapes and sizes. Some cover a neighborhood, others focus on a length of street, often called a corridor, while still others focus on the area around a transit station. Design guidelines may govern land use, such as those adopted in the city of Los Angeles to guide commercial and industrial development, urban design, architectural design, or even the design of complete streets. The zoning code is an adopted part of the city's overall municipal code or local law. Zoning implements the goals of each of the more specific land uses in terms of uses, form, design, and compatibility. Zoning must be consistent with the general plan. Zoning designations address a range of development standards which traditionally combine to define one zone of land use. New zoning codes sometimes address elements other than land use and density, such as the form that development should take, increased mixing of uses, and the way that development should relate to the street. Each zone or zoning designation in a city's code corresponds to a land use designation in a city's general plan. Zoning can address the range of uses, including single-family and multiple-family residential, commercial, industrial, public, and open space uses. Mixed-use zones are becoming standard components of modern zoning. In these zones, a mix of different uses may be allowed in a single building, such as in the example on the left. This is an example of vertical mixed use. Allowing uses to mix by placing them next to each other in a single project or on a single parcel, such as in the example on the right, is known as horizontal mixed use. Development standards found in zoning codes regulate the density or floor area, size, in terms of height and bulk, as well as the form, lot coverage, of buildings and projects. Floor area ratio, or FAR, describes the ratio of the floor area of a building to the area of the building site. For example, in the image on this slide, a FAR of 1.0 could equate to a floor area of a building and the area of the lot being the same. Residential density is a term used to describe the number of homes allowed per each acre of land. Residential densities range from single-family density zones, which allow one dwelling unit per acre or per lot of a certain minimum size, to multiple dwelling unit zones, which can allow a wide range of dwelling units per acre. A recent California law has taken effect that creates new opportunities for accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, backyard homes, or granny flats, to be built on residential properties. An ADU is a dwelling unit with a full kitchen and bathroom, which is an accessory use to a primary or main single-family residence and may be rented separately from the main residence. To support the creation of a variety of housing, state law also requires that residential density bonuses are provided. Density bonuses provide developers the opportunity to build some percentage more housing units than is allowed by zoning if some of the housing being built is sold or rented at rates affordable to lower-income households, or if the housing is built for senior households. The zoning code can also regulate lot coverage, or the percentage of a lot that may be covered by a building. Height limits in zoning codes identify the maximum allowed heights of buildings in various zones. A setback requirement is the distance a building is required to be set back from the property line or another structure. The setback area may also be called a yard. A step back is a requirement to step back portions of the buildings on upper floors from the edge of the building, as shown in this illustration. Step backs can reduce shading and visual impacts at or near street level. The term building footprint refers to the area of the site occupied by a building. Finally, while not necessarily part of the zoning code, easements also impact the ability to use land. Easements are legally required for things like water and electrical utilities and transportation in order to formally receive the right to cross or otherwise use someone else's land. The California Environmental Quality Act, known as CEQA, was passed in 1970 in order to ensure that development proposals consider and mitigate, meaning lessen or even eliminate completely, their environmental impacts. In the CEQA process, projects may be determined to be statutorily or categorically exempt. If a project is not exempt, an initial study of the project uncovers its impacts. If the project has no significant impacts, then a negative declaration can be issued and the CEQA process completed. If there are identified impacts and they can be mitigated, then a mitigated negative declaration can be completed and reviewed. If the project will result in significant impacts that cannot be fully or even partially mitigated, then an environmental impact report is warranted. Environmental review documents produced according to CEQA regulations require analysis and review of many different possible impacts of development, as shown here. Community impacts may relate to aesthetics, or safety, or cultural assets, or populations, or the provisions of public services. Development projects are entitled or approved by obtaining a series of approvals from a local government agency, such as a city or county. Project approvals can proceed along two different tracks: discretionary approvals or by right development projects. Discretionary approvals are granted only at the discretion of governing bodies. These are necessary when projects require exceptions to regulations that require judgments based on review. These types of approvals may result in the identification of community benefits that will be provided by a developer in exchange for the granting of approvals. By right development projects do not require exceptions to development regulations and therefore have a simpler path to approval. A variance must be approved by a governing body when a developer seeks to deviate from an established development standard or regulation. Incentives, such as additional density or relief from regulations, can be provided to developers in order to encourage particular kinds of development or desired public benefits. The affordable housing density bonuses we described earlier in this presentation are an example of this type of incentive. Community benefits are often required to be provided in the form of amenities in or associated with development projects as a condition of discretionary approvals. Community benefits are often required to be public, while some project amenities can be for the exclusive use of the project. In some cities or counties, development projects are subject to aesthetic design review processes conducted by city planning staff, appointed board members, or community or neighborhood councils. Sometimes they are reviewed against established design guidelines, but they are always reviewed against some form of stated requirements. Community planning affects the lives of individuals and communities as a whole and can help ensure equitable access to housing, services, and amenities for all. Communities designed with sustainability in mind can have a positive impact on our environment and economy, benefiting all of us. Incorporating healthy features in communities can improve physical, mental, and social well-being for all of us as well. Complete communities connect people and places and encourage interaction between people. Complete communities also provide people with choices and ways to get around, including walking and biking. Complete communities also create economic, environmental, social, and physical value. Finally, complete communities can serve our precious environmental, social, and cultural resources. They enhance the world instead of making negative impacts on it. This typical street can be enhanced over time to become a more desirable place for people to live and work. A shorter distance to walk across the street and well-marked, highly visible crosswalks are safer and more attractive to pedestrians. Adding bike lanes on the street also serves to accommodate more visitors, narrow the roadway, and slow traffic. Adding street trees can enhance the community's environment by providing shade and reducing energy use in buildings. Adding lighting and landscaping on the street can enhance the perceived safety and attractiveness of the area. Over time, upper stories can be added onto buildings on both sides of the street, gradually turning one-story main streets into 3- and 4-story main streets that create a sense of place. Ideally, new development will include housing that serves a range of household income and types. Adding well-designed buildings can enhance the street wall and attractiveness of an area and add places for people to live in walkable neighborhoods with shops and services that spill out onto the sidewalk. Development and more opportunities to work and live can spread from the center on both sides of a street to enhance it further, incorporate more mobility choices, and complete the community. Now that you have additional information about community planning, you may also be interested in related presentations about 2 other important aspects of creating complete communities: urban design and architecture. Each of these 3 components is defined, described, and illustrated in these presentations sponsored by LA Metro in consultation with the American Institute of Architects.